and welcome to this edition of Vahini Virtual Connect. I'm Meenu Shekhar in conversation with Kshitija Krishnaswamy and Nirmala Menon. Kshitija is Director of Corporate Citizenship at Accenture in India, and Nirmala is founder and CEO of Interweave Consulting, a Bangalore-based inclusion and diversity firm. In our conversation today, we will be discussing how empowering women can transform societies. So Kshitija and Nirmala, thank you very much for being here with us today and for sharing your views.
Sure.
Kshitija, to begin with, could you help us understand and give us some insights on when an organizational culture empowers and enables women, how does it also open up a lot of new opportunities for men? And how does this really transform a society?
Let me start with the transformation of society. I think the role of women there is evident. The transformative role that education can play, for example, with a girl child, or what we do with focusing on women's health. I think we've seen it leads to progress. It leads to greater outcomes for society as a whole. And we see this in our corporate citizenship program, Skills to Succeed, all the time. We have consciously ensured that 50% of the beneficiaries in our programs are women.
Okay.
And especially if I look at rural women in particular, focusing on them just has this multiplier effect on their children, on their community, on their village, and then overall it's just an amplifying effect as we see all through. For example, we have a rural business school in Satara, in rural Maharashtra. And we've seen that just empowering them with the tools to start a small micro enterprise, what that's done to just the level of literacy for their own children and the village as a whole.
So the entire family as well as beyond.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or if you look at a segment within all the women, girls who've been impacted, women or girls who've been impacted because of trafficking, just providing them a safe space to be able to work, giving them the ability to work on digital crowdsourcing platforms, paying their salaries directly into their bank accounts.
Okay.
Just that small, right? Yeah. That's the sort of effect that you have. And the confidence level for someone like them to be able to say, I have my life in my own hands.
Right.
So that's really what it does. And automatically when the confidence builds up in that girl or woman, the men there tend to find themselves, forced into a situation or just motivated to be able to support.
To do more.
To do more, So I think that's really what we find creating a culture. And while I'm talking about society, I think it's the same in a workplace, also, right? Women probably are more participative, share more ideas openly. And then you'll find that that culture of equality sort of allows the organization to grow. And I think we've seen this in a research that we had, a couple of years ago or last year, which was the Getting to Equal research. And I think it was so appropriately titled, When She Rises, We All Rise.
Everyone.
Right?
Nirmala, what about your thoughts on this?
Yeah, to me, it's an absolute no-brainer that they're 50% of our human resources.
Yeah.
There's just no way we can, as a country, as a nation, as an organization, progress with, ignoring 50% of our talent pool. And it's an extraordinary talent pool. And it's a collective shame, I think, that we still don't have enough women in our public spaces and in leadership. I think very high time that we kind of looked at this with a lot more urgency. And for way too long, I think the narrative has been about it being, women are struggling, poor things, we need to help them.
Yeah.
I think it's just as much about men being victims of their gender.
Yes.
Right. I think this entire expectation of a man to be a lifelong provider, to be strong, brave, show no emotions, etc., takes its toll on men. And I think more and more of them are beginning to realize this. And I think that's good for them because, the fact that men have to provide for their families all their life makes them work really hard to be very competitive, which is great, I mean, for an organization, but it's probably not very good for them. If you look at, lifespans of men and women, women live much longer than men simply because they're allowed to show their emotions, to be able to, kind of take a break when they want to, but society doesn't allow that for men.
Right.
And many of them go away not being able to explore their softer side. Because as a man, you're expected to be a man. And, and that's just such a sad thing because masculine and feminine is there with all of us.
And I believe there's a scale. We have to look at it as
Absolutely.
grading, right?
Absolutely.
Each of us having both the aspects.
Absolutely. Right. So allowing us to blossom as we are meant to blossom, I think makes it easier for everyone.
Right.
Right. So I think,
when we see this, and like Nirmala, you said it's a no-brainer. It's, I mean, absolute common sense, right? That when women do well, everybody will do well. But despite this, and various studies show that, if you just take the corporate world, for instance, that when it comes to managerial positions, women are 22% less likely than their male peers to achieve managerial positions. And when it comes to senior managers and director positions, you should be very happy where you are, director positions, women are 47% unlikely to reach this level. So why does this happen? What are some of the biases that lead to this? And really, what can organizations do to, to address these issues?
It's a very complex subject. It has multiple levels and layers. I mean, to put it very simply, if you were to look at what is this glass ceiling that we all talk about, I think it has the socio-cultural aspects of what a woman is expected to do, what are the gender roles that society expects of men and women, which plays a role in terms of the roles they assume and the permission they give themselves.
The women?
Okay. Right? So, and the men as well, right? So, the natural division of men as providers and women as carers influences a lot of the decisions that they make, and they don't even consider a number of options, right? And then there are organizational biases that exist. As long as we define leadership in terms of the masculine aspects of, rational, aggressive, competitive, et cetera, we are not, again, providing the template for a different kind of leadership. Right? So that's a bias that's lived through for so long. And these have developed because in a certain context that was necessary. In a globalized environment like ours, where collaboration and matrixed organizations are the norm, it's really about building relationships, nurturing them, building trust, all of which come a lot more naturally to women and are considered feminine qualities. So it's time to sort of redefine that template and make it more wholesome. Combined with all of this is the psyche of the woman herself, right? Being socialized to think that you are second class and you're not as good, and all of the messages that people tend to get. And like Kshitija was talking about the rural women, at least in the urban spaces, there's so much conversation around it, becoming more aware. Not that it's gone away, but it's still a lot more, out in the open. A lot of them just assume those roles without even thinking they have another choice. So they don't make informed choices. And that, I think, is a problem.
So what can, Kshitija, what can organizations do? And then we'll come to saying what can we ourselves do?
Right.
But to begin with, what can organizations do to address this?
So I think what Nirmala just said, right? It's the social conditioning. I mean, to me, these are all unconscious biases that we're not even aware of, whether we're men or women, right? So it's our own family backgrounds, the way we were raised, the conditioning that we bring to the workplace. And that's the starting point for an organization to start deconstructing. If as an organization, we really are making people, and I don't differentiate between men and women there, make them conscious of their unconscious biases, right? It's just one of those things. And I know this is an oft-repeated example. Women coming back from maternity leave are not going to be as productive, are not necessarily as sort of committed to their careers. Immediately you will find maybe they're not getting client-facing roles, maybe they're getting more program management roles, or maybe, the way organizations would then look at performance criteria, for example, and I've read this in some research somewhere, which said, one of the performance criteria for an organization was constant availability and the ability to be able to travel.
Travel, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, that's such a stereotypical, criteria, requirement.
Yes.
I mean, surely in today's virtual world, you don't need to. So why is that even there? So I think if organizations actually focused on what could be years of conditioning and say, what is it that you bring into the workplace? You bring it from your own backgrounds, that's true. Conscious small things. You're not expected to reply to an email that comes after working hours. Applies for both men and women. Today, you don't need to, have a meeting after office hours. Or, consciously, there is going to be a networking event which will be within office hours. And it's just a networking event. But it recognizes that people have the right to refuse to work after office hours because there's a work-life balance. I think some of these proactive, focused, actions that organizations take for the workplace will actually help in sort of breaking down some of these biases.
Like you said, one has to be aware of it
in the first place. And I see that even in our own community programs. It's just an automatic assumption that the woman or the mother is going to be working from home and is not working in that sense, right? It then perpetuates to the daughter. She may or may not go to school, but the boys will definitely go to school because she needs to stay at home and help. And that's really what we do even with our programs. I think the starting point of any of our CSR programs is to counsel parents, and that's both the mother and the father. In terms of talking about really what are some of their biases, which they've probably held for long. They probably see it across the community, but it's time to sort of let go of that and make that change.
What about women themselves? What can we as women do? Whether it's in the corporate world, whether it's in the outside world, how do we sort of ensure that we don't let these biases stop us? Because the biases are there. And even as we wait for organizations to do their bit, society to do its bit, what should we as women do?
See, it's not as simple. We can tell women, do this, negotiate hard for yourself, ask for what you want. It's easier said than done. When you are raised in a particular, you're socialized and raised in a certain way, it becomes so much harder. It's not that you cannot do it, but it needs a lot more prodding, and you need that mentoring and support for you to actually go ahead and do it. So first of all, women have to realize that they are important, and give themselves the legitimacy to lead. Okay.
I think the agency,
Yeah, the agency and the legitimacy to lead. First of all, realize I can do it and I must do it if I want it. A lot of women deny that to themselves because they don't think. And there is this very, what do I call it, a very uncomfortable relationship between women and power. If I'm powerful, I am going to be disliked, and being liked is such an important thing for women, right? So all of these, it's very complex, the whole aspect. So, a powerful woman will sort of underplay her power in front of a bunch of men because, men are supposed to be the powerhouses, and how can I kind of take the thunder from them? So that she'll underplay herself. Now, getting them to see it.
And that's unconscious.
It's unconscious. You don't do it deliberately.
It's not manipulation. It's not deliberate.
And I also, it's not like men are this terrible bunch of people who kind of got together and said, hey, leadership is so much fun, let's just do it ourselves and not let the women in. That's really not what they, for them also it comes, unconsciously, subconsciously, because they've always been on this one-up thing. So it just comes into the workplace, and they tend to do it as a game. Women take everything a lot more seriously in that sense. Anything that you do, I just need to do the most perfect job. And they do their job really well, and they're wondering, why am I not getting the results? Right? And they haven't sold their work, they haven't talked about it, they haven't gone and spoken about what they have done, the visibility, the networking, all of that is low. And it is very understandable that if you're making a decision, you're going to choose somebody, that you have seen and known than an unknown quantity who's done great work. You may have done great work. So it's in that situation right now. But a very interesting thing that I am noticing in the work I do is that a lot of women have made far more progress than men have. So when you're talking about women's empowerment, there's a lot more agency that's coming into women, and men have not been prepared for these empowered women in a sense.
True.
Right? So a lot of challenges both at work and on the home front.
Yes.
A lot more challenges, and I'm hearing a lot of my friends' kids are now in the marriageable age, and many of them talking about, my daughter doesn't want to get married, and my son is finding it difficult. I mean, it moves into the social arena very much because organizations are microcosms of society. Right? Just like a woman who's wearing the, mantle of a director or a senior leader, calling the shots at work, you're expected to live up to that role because everybody's looking up at you. You're going back and being a nice
different
bahu
person,
and, the docile. So it's very stressful because you're not being your authentic self.
So what would you say to the women out there? What would you tell them?
In terms of
in
what
this
they
context,
understand yourself, be very clear what it is that you want.
Okay.
Right? I think clarity of what you want usually gives you a good sense of purpose, and equip yourself to be independent. The minute you are dependent, I think you've given away something. Something very, very interesting happened the other day. I have a young girl who's working for me, and young girl as in she's about 19, 20, and that's the age when they are looking for marriage and all of that. And the mother came to me and said, we have a really good match for this girl, and she's refusing to get married. And she takes back a pretty good sum because, I leave the house to her and, all of that. Says, because she's getting this money, she's being very arrogant. So she's refusing to get married to this. Will you please counsel and coach her to kind of... So when I asked her, why are you refusing your parents? And she said to me, he's a drunkard. He's a good for nothing. I don't want to get married to him.
Fair enough.
And I was thinking, wow, this is empowerment.
Yes.
The fact that she's carrying home that amount of money at the end of the month is making her stand up to her parents, which is making them think she's being arrogant.
Yes.
I mean, somewhere there is a lot of change that is happening, whether we notice it or not. But and I think it's happening more with women than with the men.
So you're saying that women really need to understand what they want to do. We first understand what they want to do and then see how to get there.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, both of you are very successful women. You're both in very senior positions. It'd be interesting if you could tell us some instance from your career journeys where you faced a constraint, a bias of any kind, and how you dealt with it and how you refused to let that bog you down.
Probably from a previous job, not here at Accenture. And it was fairly early on in my career. I'd been working for about 4 years after business school and joined this multinational, which was setting up in India. And, the job was great. FMCG, that I was a marketing, professional. Everything sort of seemed to be aligned. And from all outward appearances, I seemed to be doing really well. Every performance review was positive. Any discussion on career development was always about me being on a fast track. And personally too, I seem to be striking a balance in terms of like 3 years into the role. I was pregnant but managed to keep working until a couple of days before I actually went in for my delivery. So, all of that was fine. I came back from my mat leave after 3.5 months, and in the interim when I was away, there'd been some changes at the top management. The expat CEO had gone back, and there was a new person who'd come in who didn't know me at all, and had managed to strike up a good relationship with my peers, a couple of my male colleagues. So when I came back, I just, a couple of days into my coming back, found that one of my colleagues was declared as the incumbent to occupy the marketing director's role. And I mean, I think obviously I was really upset and went and spoke to the new CEO in terms of saying, hey, here's the evidence. This has been the performance for the last 3 years. I've been trained, to manage the largest part of this portfolio, which makes me the right person. And somewhere I got the sense in that discussion that it was that same bias of, now that I've had a baby, and so he was worried for that role because it was a marketing-led company and that was the role. And, that was what was driving some of these decisions. And I think my first instinctive reaction was to quit or to, to look at a role somewhere else. And I think the one thing that I did, which maybe a lot of us don't do, and now that was a learning for me, I picked up the phone and called the CEO who'd gone back, who was my mentor, whom I considered a mentor.
Yeah.
I think the advice that he gave me then, which, I still sort of stand by, is he says a career by definition is long-term. So these are all little blips, right? At this point in time, be very clear about what you want. You need a work-life balance. You've just had a kid. You start somewhere afresh. You're never going to get that because you're going to have to prove yourself. You already have. And he said, and I was also being reshuffled sort of internally to another role. And he said, prove the new CEO wrong.
Wrong, okay.
And I think that was what, I did. I eventually got that marketing director's role, within the year. But I think it's something that we don't step back and do. We don't ask for help.
Okay.
In this whole, I think the context is such that we're trying to prove ourselves, that we're trying to be something that we possibly are not. We're putting ourselves under pressure, and we're not asking for help when we need it.
True, absolutely.
I think the other thing which I also learned was defining my measure of success at that point in time, and being able to sort of adjust that goal.
Okay.
Because I always believed I needed to be marketing director at a certain point in time. And who gave me that, goal, or who put that into my head? And I was looking around, and sort of defining it for myself based on others' expectations.
Perceptions and what others felt you should do.
I should be doing. Okay. And I think continuously being able to sort of assume that every opportunity was a learning opportunity and believing that in yourself that you could do it. I think, some of those were such huge learnings for me that I think it stood me, in good stead
throughout. I think not only in your career journey, but I'm sure outside
in life
too, in
as
life
well.
too.
I think my making a shift from marketing and business to even saying I really want to work with corporate social responsibility was also just that belief that it was something that I wanted to do and nobody else could define it for me.
And I'm sure this challenge you've gone through, number of women must be going through it. I'm sure very important takeaways there. Nirmala, what about you? Anything you would like to share?
Yeah, it's very interesting, because I think very early on in my, my mother doesn't work, and during my MBA, I had to be in Mumbai for a project, and I happened to stay with an aunt of mine who was a working woman. And this was the first time I was seeing a working woman at close quarters. Okay. And she would wake up at about 4:30 in the morning, get the kids ready, the breakfast, everything lunch packed, and send the kids to school, run into the shower, be out by a certain time in Mumbai. They catch the locals and whatever. And I was with her for about a month and a half. And I said, in a short while from now, this is going to be my life. And I was horrified. I said, I can't live my life like this. This is terrible and it was the monsoon time in Mumbai. She'd come back at 8 o'clock. The kids would have their wet clothes lying all over. She'll have that washed. And on weekends, she would get things ready for the week. Right? So that was a great learning in retrospect. It didn't occur to me at that time, but I said, this is not what I want to do.
Okay.
And so I then graduated, I got a job, and then, of course, marriage. And so when it came to marriage, it was very important for me that I made it very clear because I have about 35 years of work ex. So, I come from that generation where the expectation was very, very clearly the woman did everything, right? And I was convinced that that was not going to happen to me. And I got married very late, obviously, because I wasn't kind of there in the... And so when my husband proposed to me, my current husband proposed to me, I said, look, I don't keep a good house, I don't cook, I don't do this, I don't do that. I kind of gave a list. And then he looked at me and he said, but I was looking for a wife. I was looking for a maid. I said, okay, you are the person then. So in a sense, I think I planned a lot of things, including my kid, and I sort of decided I would have a child and I would take time off because that would be great for me to enjoy the, early years. So, and I did take 5-6 years off. So coming back into the workplace was another big story, but I did take those 6 years off. And I also planned that when she gets into her teens, I will take time off again.
Okay.
So when she turned 13, I quit my job saying, I want to be around to make sure that she's fine and, get to know her friends and all of that. So to talk about a career and, taking that message from your mentor, it doesn't necessarily have to be linear.
That's
You can stretch it backwards, forward, sideways, whatever, as long as you're doing meaningful things.
Okay.
And I have no regret at all about the times that I've taken off, because a lot of my friends who are now in very senior positions, classmates of mine, often look at me and say, you're probably the most successful in our batch, simply because you stepped in and out as you pleased.
Yeah.
We've all stuck in there and done whatever we needed to do. And I think that's probably a big achievement.
Right.
Because for a lot of women, they kind of go through this linear path of, getting to where they need to, and then look back and say, this is not what I wanted.
This could be this thing takeaway for men too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You don't really need to be on this linear path and going from one promotion to the other.
Absolutely.
You can take a break. You can step aside for a time being and
Yes.
grow yourself as a person.
My husband did exactly that. And some of my friends would ban us coming there because he was waxing eloquent about how wonderful it is to quit your job and follow your heart. They're saying, don't bring your husband here because my husband's talking about it as well. So this huge stigma, it takes a lot of courage to do something against the grain of what society expects of you.
Yeah.
It's much easier for women to step off and do these kinds of things. But
Absolutely,
somehow, and as women probably, we need to give our men the permission to do it.
I'll come back to this a little later, but just want to touch on another challenge that women face at the workplace, both corporate and outside, and that is, of course, the gender pay gap. Now, very often, for exactly similar qualifications, similar experience, and similar work, women get paid less. Now, what are the reasons? We have, of course, discussed some of the reasons. But again, just to go back to that, and what is it that organizations can do? What is it that women can do to somehow bridge this and finally, hopefully, at some point, eliminate it completely?
Okay, so this is an issue around the world.
Yeah.
This is not something that is, and there are multiple historical reasons as to why, and currently there are a lot of organizations that are relooking and reviewing for pay parity to make sure that all is okay, and and they're actually announcing it. In some countries, it's actually a compliance requirement, and some of them, as good practices, have started doing that in India as well. Having said that, there is this, again, studies that show that women don't negotiate for themselves. They don't, they take what's offered to them, and over a period of time, that tends to kind of create a big gap. Now, I think it's a very, very simple solution to it. It could seem very simplistic, but I think nobody should be negotiating for their salary. Organizations need to decide what it is that they can offer for that job, and it should not depend on my negotiating or bargaining skills for me to get that high, because a fair pay is what you're looking at. So that should take away this whole thing, because otherwise we are helping women to negotiate for your salary, and you're, making them do things that are really not necessary, at least not negotiating for a pay. That's, they should be able to negotiate with their stakeholders at home and in the office, etc. That's different. But the pay piece is, I think, a very simple one to
You're saying
fix.
it is really should be the responsibility of the organization.
Yes.
Wherever.
Okay. Yeah. So they fix the pay, and this is what, and then depends on your performance and everything else. Of course, you will have,
irrespective of gender, obviously.
Absolutely. And, sometimes women are also very happy to take a lower paying job because they're being offered flexibility. Now, flexibility does not necessarily mean you're not delivering. It should be on the deliverables, the results and the outcomes that you're producing, and not because my boss has given me flexibility, so I'm letting it pass.
Okay.
So they actually deal with it. And a lot of women feel guilty about having taken time off for mat leave and things like that. So when they come back, it doesn't matter. I have a job to go back to.
Yeah.
Or when they're coming back after a break. Women are very apologetic a lot of the times. And, and they kind of think I'm good where I get. Yet another thing is also women tend to compare themselves with other women who are also being paid low. So they don't get to know
So
that.
they don't look at the role, at the output, the responsibility that they have.
Yeah. So they're not comparing themselves with people in similar jobs.
Yeah.
They're comparing themselves with other women and saying, okay, I think I'm not doing too badly,
Okay.
So there are multiple reasons, and I don't think anybody should take advantage of somebody who doesn't know, especially not an organization. And as an equal
Yeah. And, you know, I think this is not just sort of perception or something that we all believe. It's not just an ethical imperative. I think it's a business priority for all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, I think this is borne out by our research as well, which says getting a workplace or where a culture of equality exists just leads to more innovation and business growth. So it's just the right thing to do in terms of having a having a workplace that has a culture of equality, where women and men feel that they are on the same level footing. Automatically, that assumes, you know, gender or I mean, the pay gap, you know, between genders should not exist, right? We are at this stage now where we're even discussing it. So obviously it means that there is some affirmative action that needs to happen if it isn't, or it is already happening in small doses. So I think it is a worldwide phenomenon. I don't think it's a gray area in terms of there's just no, you know, is it happening or not happening?
You'd be surprised. There are people who don't think, men also, women too, men and women who think there is no such thing.
Right.
So good that at least we are talking about it.
No, it's quite interesting. I mean, if you really look at the perceptions on gender conversations, for a lot of men, this is a mission accomplished. You know, it's a level playing field. But for a lot of women, this is still work in progress. Right? It is still harder for women, despite their education, their, you know, being very articulate and strong and competent and all of that. It's still harder for women. And a lot of men find it difficult to believe that because, you know, here is a woman who's equally smart. Why would she have any more problems than me?
Okay.
Right?
In fact, you know, that's the next question I wanted to touch on, next issue, that we are talking about saying that, you know, women should speak up, speak out. And a lot of time we hear this, that you should negotiate, you must not be scared, you must be confident, etc. But when women actually speak up and they speak out, when they ask rightfully for what is theirs, you know, no extra privileges, nothing. And this is not true only for the corporate world, in the workplace, but even in homes. They are seen as being, like we spoke earlier, about being difficult or being arrogant, about the example that you gave, because she's earning, she's arrogant or unreasonable. And when very often when women are passionate about their work, when they're ambitious, ambition in a woman is seen in a way as a negative trait. And therefore women tend to hold back. So again, these are some of the issues that you did touch earlier. But what would you say to these women, you know, that if just because you're perceived, or there's a bias against a woman speaking up and speaking out, asking for what is rightfully yours, what should you do?
You know, conditioning doesn't go away overnight, right? So I think we all need to recognize that that's reality. But having said that, I look at it, and maybe I'm just saying the glass is half full. I think there are more and more employers who, if I just look at the workplace, I think more and more employers who are focusing on, you know, like I said, the culture of equality, right? There are gender sensitization trainings for both the men and the women, or there are unconscious bias trainings. I think if you look at providing women with role models or mentorship, you know, to be comfortable in their own skins, I think the whole the culture needs to change, and that means both men and women have a role to play in that. But I think it's about slowly chipping away at those biases that exist. I mean, like you said, it's not just in the workplace, it's at home. You know, it's what we tell our boys that don't cry like a girl. You know, if that kid falls. I mean, hey, we've started that bias at that age, right? Or you've turned around and said, why are you yelling like a boy does? I mean, when you tell your girl that. So I remember the story of, again, this is the Rural Business School, you know, up in Satara. And I was visiting our program there, our project, and you know, they were showing me what they'd done, how they'd benefited from this training, and there was this one woman who had started a goat insemination business. It's it's an agri-rearing, animal rearing community, and she said that, you know, once she'd got the training, she'd gone on to take a loan, and then with the help of the local sort of forest officers there, she'd started this goat insemination business. Now she employs 5 other women and, you know, manages about 60 villages under her span. great finished conversation. I don't think they realize that I do understand the local language Marathi. Okay, so after this sort of was done, they were the field officer who'd taken me from our nonprofit, and the woman was speaking in Marathi. So it wasn't for my benefit, right? This lady said to her that, hey, I met your husband and he really complained about you, about how, you know, now you have no time for family. And in fact, he had invested in a atta maker and a roti maker because he can't depend on you anymore.
Oh, goodness.
But he said it with a lot of pride.
Oh, that's nice. Okay.
And, you know, so I look at it and say, such a huge change, such a huge shift in mindset. And not just with one woman, her family, her kids, 5 others that she's employed who've become, you know, sort of economically independent. And that's what happened. So, yes, it's conditioning. He still believed that she should have, but, you know, that's his new normal now. And that's really what's changing, right? So I think, yes, you can look at it and say we're far away from that, or you can say we're making some progress.
What about you, Nirmala?
Yeah, in fact, with the story that you mentioned just brought up to me the story of a colleague of mine who works at Interweave, young mother, and they've had a baby boy. And they used to travel a great deal, and they decided they would get a passport for this little fellow. And so they go and to the passport office, they bring the form, and now you have to give him a surname. And she insisted that her name should be there as well. She said, so the boy is called Samant, her husband's name is Karthik, and her name is Aruna. And so she says, we should have Samant, Aruna, Karthik. And he says, okay, we can do that. And then she said, no, that's not a good idea because they will shorten Aruna, it will become A, and then I'm nowhere in the picture, so it can be Karthik Aruna. So he said, oh, that doesn't sound very nice. You know, Samant Aruna doesn't sound like a proper name. He said, no, I find this absolutely fine. That's how it's going. And finally, they decide, let's have it as a hyphenated name. So they trot off to the passport office, and the passport officer says, no, you can't have a hyphenated word. It has to be. So then the argument came back, you know, what do we do? So finally, this little fellow is called Samant Aruna Karthik as one word. Small, very small, but a change.
Important, yes. Important,
right? So I think it's beginning to happen. Women are standing up and asking for what they believe, you know, is important for them. And I think each of those little things will add up. And I think cumulatively, it's going to happen in a very big way very soon. Actually, much sooner than we are expecting, is my sense, because you see all of these little things all around you, and you're saying, hey, this is changing.
That's very encouraging.
It is. You know, all the time, and I'm noticing a lot of these things, you know, possibly because I work in this space, and it's all good signals for me.
Again, getting back to the workplace culture, right? And we have again touched upon some of these issues earlier. But so would it be right to say that we should relook at some of the attributes that are traditionally thought of as you know, qualities that leaders or successful people should have? Because typically what we see happening is that because we see attributes like being you know, assertive, being brutal, being competitive, and being general, you know, what the masculine feature attributes, masculine and again quote unquote masculine features. And typically what happens is that a lot of men who are not naturally like that, don't have these qualities, very aggressive qualities, and women also who don't have these qualities feel that in order to succeed in their careers, in order to succeed in their work life, they need to build these qualities. So should we be re-looking at them, and should we be really looking at other qualities that we need to encourage and celebrate at the workplace, of course, and even outside in society as a whole?
Yeah, I definitely think we need a whole range of qualities, attributes. You know, there are different points in your career and, you know, your job where different skills will be required. So your ability to be competitive and direct and, you know, aggressive, etc., is required just as much as you need to be nurturing and coaching and supportive, right? So I think both are required. However, having said that, like I was saying, in today's environment, a leader is not just somebody who's achieving results. If you're looking at sustainability, the long-term piece around emotional intelligence, your ability to nurture, coach, and retain employees, build resilience, all of this is build trust,
Right.
All of these are very, very important, just as important as your competencies to do a technical job. So from that angle, a lot more of the feminine qualities are the more sustainable qualities that you need. These you need to pull up as and when required. But the rest of it, where you're self-empowered teams, you're allowing your teams to be creative and they're self-managing and all of that. You're giving them that freedom to function. And it's all built on trust. And that, I think, is a quality that will increasingly become important for a leader.
More important. And in the business world too, right?
Yeah, and you touched about emotional intelligence. I mean, we have a term that we call WEQ, which is really, it was IQ, it was EQ, and now it's WEQ, where you need the skills to be able to collaborate and work with each other, the self-awareness to know how to bring your best self to work, and really about interacting to make sure that it is sustainable, that what you're putting out is, much bigger than your individual strength. And I think at work, if you're not able to bring your truly human self or bring the best of your own abilities, irrespective of whether you're a man or woman, then the organization does not innovate. So it's about recognizing, can people, like you said, pull up on whatever strength they have, but play to their strengths. But to an environment where they can play to their own strength and complement each other, together. So this is something that we talk about internally within the workplace, and we, in our community programs, in our Skills to Succeed program, this is something that we genuinely believe is what the future of work looks like. Because both virtually as well as in the real world, when you're face to face, this is going to be an increasingly important trait that each one of us needs to have. So there you have it, a new attribute, that sort of needs to get pulled back, and it's gender agnostic.
Hopefully at some point in time and some point in life, we will come when it is not gender based at all, and it's just individual
right.
based.
And we are not having
these conversations anymore, however interesting they are. So as we come to our session, any thoughts that you would like to leave our viewers with? Any takeaways that a lot of interesting points that we've discussed today, and we said these are complex issues, no easy answers, but your final thoughts for the viewers.
I think, and this is both to men and women, define a purpose for yourself in both your personal and your professional lives. Define a measure of success for yourself and not because somebody else is doing it for you. Play to your strengths. I think collaborate, and cultivate a growth mindset. I mean, the world is rapidly changing. You don't know what's around the corner. The biggest thing you can do as a service to yourself is to continuously learn and to continuously be able to adapt. I think that's really what is going to be important in the workplace, and for yourself to be intentional about your careers.
Great. Nirmala?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with everything that Kshitija has said. I'll probably leave a slightly gendered message for the listeners. To women, I would say, ask for what you want. Ambition is sort of assumed for men, but rarely assumed for women. So women have to make their ambitions and aspirations known, not just to their managers, but also at home. So in a sense, you're building up the support back home, because any successful woman you look at, they will talk about the support they've had from their homes, right? So it's very important for women, unlike men, who can just assume that support from their homes. And for men, I think what I would like to do is to give them an invitation to break away from this masculine role that they have been bearing for too long. Take a break from that and sort of explore their nurturing side as well. And as soon as we kind of take away the shame and judgment that we tend to give men who do roles that are feminine, I think we would have definitely start to make movement. Until then, it is going to be very skewed, right? So for all of this to settle, because balance is the most important thing. If one is moving right now, we've given our women permission to be like men, but we've still not allowed our men to be like women. So until we do that, it's never going to be a level playing field.
Absolutely.
So I think that would be my...
And like we said, at the end of the day, whatever we are as individuals, to be authentic to our personalities.
Yeah.
So thank you both very much. It's been wonderful having you here with us, and thank you very much for sharing your insights. Thank you, viewers. We hope you found the conversation interesting and insightful, and we hope that together we can all make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meenu.
Thanks.